Hello, awesome artists. Today we are making clay bowls. Now I've made two little ones for example purposes. I have this, whoa, wiggly. I have this one that is leather hard, which means it's been out drying overnight actually. It's still a little soft, but I can tell it's much firmer. The walls don't move around if I pick up the piece, right? This piece is only been out drying for an hour or two, and if I move the walls, right, it bends super easily. The clay is pretty soft, so we want to be really gentle when we're making our pieces today. All right, so you're gonna get a few things. You're gonna get a piece of canvas so your clay doesn't stick to the table. You should not have clay directly on the table. It will be super hard to get off this table. It's gonna take a lot of wiping and scraping, and I don't have time for that. So when you get your piece of clay, you're gonna get a little bit of time to just play around with it. Just sort of feel it in your hands, see how it feels. This clay is particularly sticky, so it's got a lot of water in it. So some ways to get out that water so it's a little firmer are to spread it out, oh my goodness, so wiggly, on this canvas, right? So I'm squishing it down on the canvas. The great thing about the canvas is that it doesn't stick. So if I squish it down, it'll peel right off. And that canvas is gonna absorb some of this moisture. So I'm gonna take my time and kind of just push it. And this is just like fun too. It's like squishing your fingers in the clay. So I'm just squishing it down into the canvas, let it sit for a second, and then I'm just gonna peel it up. And you can tell where the moisture is on the canvas, right, where I've been squishing it down. So do that a couple times, and that'll help take some of the moisture out of your clay. And yeah, that should help a lot. So once I'm ready to actually start making my bowl, I'm going to decide what method I want to do. So I'm going to show you two different ways to make a clay bowl today. So I'm going to start with a pinch pot. So pinch pots are pretty easy. They're what you think they are. They are a pot you make by pinching. I'm going to make this into a ball, and I'm smacking it with my hand gently, not like crazy hard, just gently, little slap, and then I'm rotating it as I go. So I'm making a nice round ball. I think you could roll on the table, but it might wiggle the table a lot. So I'm just gonna do this in my hands. All right, once my clay is nice and smooth, I'm gonna take my thumb and I'm gonna squish it right down in the middle of this ball. I'm not gonna go all the way through. If I go all the way through, then I'll have a hole in the bottom of my pot, and I don't want that. So I'm just gonna squish it in quite a bit, and now I've got this big old hole. This is a good start. So I'm gonna put my thumb back in, and I'm gonna take my outside fingers, right, and I'm gonna do this motion. So I'm really just blah, 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 blah with the pads of my fingers. I'm not pinching like this. I'm pinching with the flat parts of my fingers because I'm trying to squeeze that clay and go all the way around. So I'm rotating in a circle as I'm pinching. And I can pinch up the side of the wall and down the side of the wall. And I'm trying to go evenly so I don't have any big old lumps or really, really thin spots. In order for me to make this solid, these are gonna go into the kiln, and the kiln is gonna suck all that water all the way out of the clay, and then we're gonna be able to glaze them. All right, so I'm gonna take my time. The great thing about the canvas too is you can spin it. So I'm just going around, rotating my piece. And I wanna make sure I've got a nice flat bottom so it'll actually stand. So this is a good example of that, right? I made a pretty flat bottom on the piece, and it's nice and wide, so when I put it down, it won't spill everywhere, right? Something about this piece that you wanna think about is this wall is pretty high right up here, and then it gets pretty low down here, and especially down here it gets pretty low. So if I were to put something in this like a liquid, I couldn't fill it up very much because it would spill over that short edge, but it would still be held by this tall side. So maybe you want to make your walls more even than this, right? So to do that, I'm going to be pinching evenly, right? If I'm just pinch in one spot, that's going to thin it out and make it much taller on that side. I don't want that. Going around, going around, going around. And you can tap, 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 tap the bottom of your pot on the table, and that'll help make a nice flat spot. And I can also push down. So I'm going to be coming around. I'm going to be looking to see if your walls are too thick. I'm going to be looking to see if your walls are too thin. If you're noticing when you're making your pinch pot, your walls are starting to come out and separate, and it's getting really wide and floppy and hard to control, I want you to pinch together. So instead of just pinching around with one hand, I want you to squeeze the clay together. And you can see how it's made that little wrinkle. I can totally smooth that out. And it does make your walls a little thicker again, but I'm going to rotate and squeeze, rotate and squeeze. And I'm going to do that all the way around. And this helps compress the clay. Clay loves compression. So I've squeezed all the way around, and it looks a little lumpier, but the walls are so much straighter. They're really going up and down instead of out and wide. I can also turn my pot to the side, turn my bowl to the side, and smooth with my hands. And I'm going up, right? So this is the top, and this is the bottom. So I'm pulling that clay up. I'm smoothing it up, 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 and that'll help give it some height so it's not so wide and floppy. It's much harder to go up vertical with clay than it is to go out. Clay is very heavy and it can get wet, so it might want to go out to the side. My clay is super wet, so I don't really need any water, but if you're getting some cracking, if your clay is feeling dry, you can dip your fingers, just your fingertips, into this container of water. And I'm just doing the tips of my fingers. If you make your clay too wet, it will take forever to dry out, and then you won't be able to make your nice bowl. It'll just be a big soupy mess. So do not add too much water, right? That's a big worry with clays, especially those little kids. They add too much water and then it's a mess and they can't make anything. All right, so I'm getting pretty close to being done with my bowl. If you would like to, you can take some pointy tools and add some cool designs to your piece. I like actually this, can you see it, this flat bottom part? I like making little dots. That's pretty cool. If I poke too far in, it'll make, a hole, and I don't want to do that. So if you accidentally do that, make sure that you seal it up, right? So I'm just sliding over that spot. Maybe I'll take a little piece up top and squish it over and then just smooth it out. Both the inside and the outside. That happens, that's okay, you can fix that. Other tools you might have are some plastic knives. These are really nice for making smooth, flat edges. You can also take these little round pieces and make cool polka dot kind of designs. This is very sticky right here. But you get the idea, right? So once we're all done with our piece, I want to see your name on the bottom. So you will take your piece, turn it upside down so I'm writing on the bottom, and I'm going to carve my initials into the bottom. Right there. You can see that. All right, first name and last name. And then I will let it dry. Let's check out the other way of making a pinch pot. The other way to make a pinch pot is to use the coil method. So I'm going to pull off a chunk of clay and I'm going to roll out a coil. And this part can be kind of tricky. Oh, my camera's going crazy. It can be kind of tricky. So make sure that you're working on your canvas, right? One hand should be holding your canvas down, right, so it's not moving, and the other hand should be rolling your clay. So I can also roll it in my hands like this, and I'm gonna flip it over. If one side's getting too thick or too thin, I'm gonna roll in the thicker spot. There we go. So I'm starting to make these coils, right? And so now I'm gonna start curling them up. This can be a little tricky because you might get a little cracking here. If you get a little cracking, dip your finger in that water. Just smooth it out. And I'm gonna curl, curl, curl. I'm gonna make the base of my piece. Before I move on, I need to smooth everything out and squish it all together, right? So I'm gonna slide my finger across and seal up these edges so I can make a nice flat base. There we go. So now I've got my base. I'm gonna pull off another piece of clay, roll out into that coil. This takes a little bit longer, but some students like it better than the pinching because you get more even walls. All right, so I've got my coil. I'm gonna start building on top. So to build on top, I need to score it. So when I say score, I mean make marks. So I'm gonna make some marks, and this helps the clay hold together. I'm just making all these sorts of scratch marks. All right, so now when I squish that clay down, it has somewhere to go into the grooves. You see what I'm doing? So now I've got this tail, and I'm gonna start stacking the tail on top, and I'm scoring as I'm going. This clay is really sticky, so we don't need any more water. So you can see I've started stacking these coils, right? And it's gonna start building up. I can now smooth this out. Maybe I wanna go this way. There we go. All right, so I'm smoothing out that wall so it's gonna be nice and strong. I can also kind of pinch it if it's too thick. And I really wanna smooth it out as I go, because if I make my piece too big, it's gonna be hard to get my hand all the way down here and see if I've smoothed out all these spots. So really taking my time there. So you can see where I've smoothed out and then where I haven't. You can still see that seam. If you leave a seam like this, does it look cool? Yeah, it looks really cool. But you're risking something coming through. So you probably won't be able to put any liquid in this, right? Because there could be some cracking here because you're not smoothing everything out. So something to think about. If you don't smooth out those seams, you might not have a very strong and secure bowl. All right, so I've smoothed it out, and I'm just gonna keep going. I'm just gonna keep rolling out those coils. And I try to make them the same thickness every time. And I'm gonna just keep going where I left off. Score, score, score. Make those marks. And I wanna keep going, right, to build up those walls on top of each other, stacking them right on top. All right, so that is the coil method. So when you make your bowl today, decide, do you want to use the pinch pot method? Do you want to use the coil bowl method? It is up to you, but we are all making those bowls for the harvest supper.